All right, so today we're diving into something that sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, a little bit sci-fi even.
A strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Hmm.
Imagine the U.S. government, like, hoarding Bitcoin.
Like it does with oil.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
It's an idea that's gaining some serious traction, though, and we're going to break down why.
And what it could mean for you.
Right. We've got some insights from a recent Motley Fool article that we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, this idea, it's fascinating how it tries to take like traditional finance and bridge it to this new world of cryptocurrency. It's like
Yeah.
they're taking this concept of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve
Right.
and giving it a digital makeover.
Yeah, exactly. So for those who haven't been following like every twist and turn of the Bitcoin saga, what exactly is a strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Essentially, it's a government-held stockpile of Bitcoin,
Okay.
like a digital piggy bank, if you will.
Yeah.
Proponents argue that it would act as a safety net for the U.S. economy,
Right.
a way to hedge against financial instability, and maybe even help chip away at that eye-watering $35 trillion national debt.
Hold on, using Bitcoin to tackle the national debt. That's a bold claim.
It is.
Who's actually pushing for this?
It's a surprisingly diverse coalition, actually.
Really?
Yeah, you've got fiscal conservatives worried about the ballooning debt, obviously.
Makes sense.
Then you have the tech enthusiasts who see Bitcoin as the future of finance.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't forget the digital gold crowd who
Right.
believe that Bitcoin is like the 21st century equivalent of the gold standard.
It's interesting how this is bringing together these groups that usually don't see eye to eye, especially when it comes to finances.
Yeah.
Is there any real chance of this actually happening?
Well, prediction markets, which are basically platforms where people can bet on the likelihood of future events,
Right.
give it about a 1 in 3 chance of happening in the first 100 days of Trump's presidency.
Okay.
So it's not a certainty,
Mhm.
but it's definitely on the radar.
Okay, so it's not just a fringe theory anymore.
Right.
But how would this even work? Like, practically, how does the government buy trillions of dollars worth of Bitcoin without causing some serious market chaos?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, literally.
Right.
One idea being floated is to liquidate some of the U.S. gold reserves to fund the purchase.
Mm.
You know, swapping old-school gold bars for digital gold.
Mm. I can see how that would appeal to the digital gold
Yeah.
proponents.
Right.
But wouldn't selling off a large chunk of our gold reserves send shockwaves to the global markets?
It definitely could.
Hmm.
And that's just one of the many logistical hurdles this whole strategic Bitcoin reserve idea faces.
Okay, so we've got the feds maybe possibly considering a Bitcoin piggy bank.
Yeah,
But it's not just at the national level, right? You mentioned states getting in on the action.
absolutely.
Okay.
Things are moving faster at the state level, actually.
Mm.
10 states, including heavy hitters like Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania,
Wow.
are seriously exploring creating their own Bitcoin reserves.
10 states. That's a pretty significant number.
It is.
What's driving this state-level interest?
It's a combination of factors.
Huh.
Some states see it as a way to attract tech investment and position themselves as leaders in this like burgeoning cryptocurrency industry.
Right.
Others are looking for ways to diversify their state treasuries and potentially hedge against inflation.
So it's like a mini Bitcoin arms race brewing right here in the U.S.
Yeah, kinda.
But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
What could this all mean for Bitcoin on a global scale?
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
If the U.S., with its massive economic clout,
Yeah.
jumps headfirst into Bitcoin, it could trigger a domino effect.
Hmm.
Imagine other countries, especially those vying for economic and technological dominance, feeling pressured to follow suit.
Yeah.
We could be witnessing the early stages of a global Bitcoin arms race.
A global Bitcoin arms race. Okay, now I'm really picturing a sci-fi movie scenario.
Right.
Like countries stockpiling Bitcoin like some futuristic weapon.
It's a thought-provoking image for sure. And it highlights the potential for Bitcoin to disrupt not just the financial system, but the geopolitical landscape as well.
Okay, so we've got this potential economic and geopolitical earthquake brewing.
Yeah.
And it all hinges on this digital currency that most people still don't fully grasp.
It's true.
Where does that leave the average person? Should we all be rushing out to buy Bitcoin right now?
I think that's the question that everybody is asking.
Right.
But before we jump to any conclusions, there's a lot more to unpack here.
Okay.
We need to delve into the potential benefits and risks the environmental considerations
Mm.
and the regulatory maze that surrounds all of this.
Right. It's not just about the price of Bitcoin going up or down.
No.
This is about potentially reshaping the entire global financial system.
Right.
And we need to understand what that means for all of us.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to do.
Right.
To dive deep into these complex issues and provide you with the insights you need to navigate this rapidly evolving landscape.
This has already been quite a roller coaster ride. We've laid the groundwork, but there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
Stay with us as we delve into the nitty-gritty of the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining, the wild world of crypto regulation,
Yes.
and the potential risks lurking beneath the surface of this Bitcoin revolution.
It's going to be a fascinating journey, so buckle up and get ready for the next leg of our deep dive.
All right, so we've established that this strategic Bitcoin reserve is a pretty big deal,
Definitely.
potentially some massive implications.
Right.
But before we get too carried away with visions of a Bitcoin-powered future,
Yeah.
we need to talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the energy hog in the server farm,
Right.
Bitcoin mining, and its impact on the environment.
It's an issue that we can't ignore for sure.
Yeah.
Bitcoin mining, the process that generates new Bitcoins and verifies transactions,
Right.
it requires a massive amount of computing power.
Hmm.
And all that computing power consumes a staggering amount of energy.
Yeah. I've heard people compare Bitcoin's energy consumption to like entire countries.
Yeah.
Is that really accurate?
It's not hyperbole.
Wow.
Some studies suggest that Bitcoin mining uses as much electricity as a medium-sized country like Argentina. And with this growing interest in Bitcoin, especially with this talk of strategic reserves,
Right.
that energy demand is only going to increase.
That's a serious concern, especially when you consider the global push for renewable energy and reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah.
So how does Bitcoin mining actually work?
Mm.
Like, what makes it such an energy-intensive process?
At its core, Bitcoin mining is a competitive process
Okay.
where powerful computers are racing to solve these complex mathematical problems. The first one to solve the problem gets to add a new block of transactions to the Bitcoin blockchain
Okay.
and is rewarded with newly minted Bitcoins.
So that's the incentive
Exactly.
to use all this computing power.
Right.
Okay.
This process is called proof of work.
Proof of work.
Ugh.
Okay. I'm guessing that's where the intense computing power and thus the energy consumption comes into play.
You got it. Okay.
It's like an arms race with miners constantly upgrading their hardware, seeking out the cheapest sources of energy to gain an advantage.
So the more miners join the race and the more powerful their computers become,
Right.
the more energy the whole system consumes.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound very sustainable.
That's the dilemma, right?
Yeah.
The very process that secures the Bitcoin network and makes it so appealing, its decentralized and tamper-proof nature,
Right.
also comes at this significant environmental cost.
Okay, so it's a problem. We get it.
Yeah.
Are there any solutions in sight?
Well,
Is there any way to make Bitcoin mining more environmentally friendly?
there are definitely efforts underway to address this issue.
Okay.
Some miners are transitioning to renewable energy sources,
Okay.
like solar and wind power.
That makes sense. If you're going to be using a lot of electricity, you might as well try to make it clean energy. Exactly. And there's also a lot of research being done on more energy-efficient mining hardware and algorithms. One promising area is the development of alternative consensus mechanisms,
Okay.
like proof of stake,
Okay.
which require significantly less energy than proof of work.
Proof of stake, what's that all about?
So in a proof of stake system, instead of miners competing to solve these complex math problems,
Right.
they essentially put up a stake of their own cryptocurrency holdings as collateral. The more coins you stake, the higher the chance you'll be selected to validate transactions and earn rewards.
Interesting. So it's less about brute computing power
Yeah.
and more about having a vested interest in the network's security.
Exactly. And because it eliminates the need for these energy-intensive mining rigs,
Right.
proof of stake can be orders of magnitude more energy efficient.
Well.
Some newer cryptocurrencies are already using this system, and there's talk of potentially transitioning Bitcoin to proof of stake in the future, though that's a complex and controversial topic.
Okay, so there's hope for a greener Bitcoin future.
Yeah,
But it sounds like there are still some technical hurdles to overcome.
definitely.
But even if we solve the energy problem, we still have another major issue to tackle,
Yeah.
regulation.
Uh-huh.
It feels like governments around the world are still playing catch-up when it comes to cryptocurrencies.
You're absolutely right. The regulatory landscape for cryptocurrencies is constantly evolving. Different countries are taking vastly different approaches,
Right.
which adds another layer of complexity to this whole strategic Bitcoin reserve discussion.
It's like the Wild West out there with everyone trying to figure out the rules as they go along.
Yeah, it really is.
So how does this regulatory uncertainty affect the possibility of a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Well, it creates a lot of challenges.
Okay.
For the U.S. government to hold trillions of dollars in Bitcoin,
Right.
there would need to be a clear and robust regulatory framework in place. This would likely involve addressing key issues like investor protection, preventing money laundering, and establishing clear guidelines for tax implications.
I imagine those are some pretty intense conversations happening in Washington right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
And wouldn't this move by the U.S. potentially force other countries to step up their regulatory game as well?
It would definitely put pressure on other nations to clarify their stance on cryptocurrencies. If the U.S. makes this major commitment to Bitcoin,
Right.
it could trigger a wave of regulatory action around the world as countries scramble to adapt to this new financial reality.
It's fascinating to think that the U.S., by creating this reserve,
Yeah,
could end up shaping the global regulatory landscape for cryptocurrencies.
it's a possibility.
But let's face it, with any new technology, there are risks involved.
Sure.
Bitcoin is still relatively young,
It is.
and we're still learning about its vulnerabilities. So let's talk about those risks.
Of course. It's crucial to acknowledge the potential downsides. We've touched on the environmental concerns and regulatory hurdles,
Right.
but there are other risks specific to the strategic Bitcoin reserve itself.
Okay, lay it on us. What are some of the things that could go wrong?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the inherent volatility of Bitcoin. We've seen its price swing wildly in the past, sometimes by tens of thousands of dollars in a single day.
Right.
If governments are holding massive amounts of Bitcoin, those price swings could have a significant impact on their finances.
That's a good point. Imagine the headlines, U.S. loses billions as Bitcoin crashes overnight.
Exactly.
Not exactly the kind of stability governments are known for.
Not really.
Yeah.
And then there's the potential for manipulation.
Okay.
The Bitcoin market, while growing rapidly, is still relatively small compared to traditional financial markets.
Right.
This makes it more susceptible to manipulation by large players, whether they be wealthy individuals, institutions, or even governments themselves.
So there's a risk that this whole thing could be rigged.
It's a possibility.
That doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
No, it doesn't. And then there's also the issue of cybersecurity.
Right.
Bitcoin is a digital asset, which means it's vulnerable to hacking and theft. A government holding a large Bitcoin reserve would be a prime target for cybercriminals.
Okay, starting to feel a little uneasy now.
Yeah.
Environmental concerns, regulatory uncertainty, market volatility, potential for manipulation, and now cybersecurity threats.
It's a lot.
Are there any upsides to this whole Bitcoin reserve idea?
Well,
Give us some reasons to be optimistic.
don't worry. It's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, good.
While the risks are real and significant, there are also potential benefits to consider.
Okay.
It's all about weighing the pros and cons.
Okay, let's hear those potential benefits. Give us a reason to be bullish on Bitcoin.
Well, one potential benefit is increased financial inclusion. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have the potential to provide financial services to people who are currently excluded from traditional banking systems.
Okay.
Think about those who lack access to bank accounts or credit cards. Bitcoin could provide a way for them to participate in the global economy.
So you're saying Bitcoin could empower individuals, especially in developing countries, by giving them access to financial tools and services that were previously out of reach.
Precisely. It's about democratizing finance and giving individuals more control over their own money.
Okay, I like that. What about from a macroeconomic perspective? Are there any potential benefits for countries that hold Bitcoin reserves?
Some economists argue that Bitcoin could act as a hedge against inflation.
Okay.
Unlike fiat currencies, which can be printed at will by central banks,
Right.
Bitcoin has a fixed supply. That makes it less susceptible to inflationary pressures, which could be particularly appealing in times of economic uncertainty.
So in a world where everything is getting more expensive, Bitcoin could be a way for governments to protect their wealth?
Yeah, potentially.
I can see how that would be attractive. But we've already talked about how volatile Bitcoin can be.
Right.
So how does that factor into the inflation hedge argument?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that Bitcoin's effectiveness as an inflation hedge is still being debated. While its fixed supply is a key characteristic, Its volatility could potentially undermine its ability to serve as a stable store of value over the long term.
Right. So it's a potential benefit, but not without its caveats.
Exactly.
What else is there on the plus side?
Well, there's also the potential for innovation.
Okay.
The blockchain technology that underpins Bitcoin has applications far beyond just currency.
Right.
It could revolutionize industries like supply chain management, healthcare, and voting systems,
Mhm.
increasing transparency, security, and efficiency.
So it's not just about the money then.
Yeah.
It's about the underlying technology and its potential to disrupt and improve various aspects of our lives.
Exactly. And that's why this whole discussion about the strategic Bitcoin reserve is so captivating.
Hmm.
It's forcing us to think about the future of money technology and the global economy in a whole new light.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little more optimistic now. But I'm also realizing how much is still unknown.
Right.
This is clearly a complex issue with no easy answers.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Right.
We're navigating uncharted territory here.
Yeah.
There are potential benefits and significant risks to consider. And the ultimate outcome is still highly uncertain.
Right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No,
But it's definitely a conversation worth having.
for sure.
So where do we go from here? What should we be watching for as this story unfolds?
Well, the next few months will be crucial.
Okay.
The first 100 days of Trump's presidency will likely give us some indication of whether he's serious about pursuing the strategic Bitcoin reserve at the federal level.
Right.
We'll need to pay close attention to any policy announcements or executive orders related to cryptocurrency.
And we'll be keeping a close eye on those states that are forging ahead with their own Bitcoin plans.
Absolutely. What happens in those states could set a precedent for other states and even the federal government to follow.
Right.
We also need to watch how the global regulatory landscape evolves and whether other countries start to make similar moves.
It's mind-boggling to think that we could be witnessing the birth of a new global financial order, all centered around this digital currency that was created just over a decade ago.
It's a testament to the disruptive power of technology and the rapid pace of change in the 21st century. And it highlights the importance of staying informed, engaged, and adaptable.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But there's still one crucial piece of the puzzle to explore.
Yeah.
The geopolitical implications of all of this.
Right.
What happens when Bitcoin starts to challenge the US dollar's dominance on the world stage? Could this really lead to those Bitcoin-fueled conflicts we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
We'll be back after a quick word from our sponsor to delve into those questions and wrap up our exploration of the strategic Bitcoin reserves.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Okay, we're back and ready to tackle the final frontier in our exploration of the strategic Bitcoin reserve,
Yeah.
the geopolitical arena.
This is where things could get really interesting.
Right.
Remember we talked about that potential for a global Bitcoin arms race?
Yeah.
Well, if countries start hoarding Bitcoin like some kind of digital weapon,
Right.
it could have some pretty major implications for the balance of power on the world stage.
Okay, so let's play this out. What happens if Bitcoin really does start to challenge the US dollar's dominance as the world's reserve currency?
That's the trillion-dollar question.
Yeah.
The U.S. dollar's role as the world's reserve currency has given the U.S. immense economic and political power for decades.
Right.
But if countries start shifting their reserves away from the dollar and towards Bitcoin, it could erode that power.
So you're saying that Bitcoin could potentially weaken the U.S.'s position as a global superpower?
It's not impossible. Think about it. For years, countries have held U.S. dollars in their reserves because it's been the most stable and widely accepted currency for international trade.
Right.
But if faith in the dollar wanes and Bitcoin gains more acceptance, we could see a gradual shift in the global financial order.
Wow, that would be a seismic shift in global power dynamics.
It would.
So what would that mean for the average person? Would we all suddenly be paying for our groceries in Bitcoin?
I think it's unlikely that Bitcoin would completely replace the dollar anytime soon.
Okay.
It's more likely that we'd see a multipolar world with various currencies and digital assets all competing for dominance.
So it wouldn't be an overnight revolution, but more like a slow and steady evolution of the global financial system.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to understand the potential long-term implications of these trends.
Right.
What happens if the U.S. loses its grip on the global financial system? How does that impact trade, international relations, and even global security?
Those are some pretty big questions.
They are.
And honestly, they're a little bit unnerving to think about.
I understand It's understandable to feel apprehensive.
Yeah.
We're talking about some potentially fundamental shifts in the way the world works.
Right.
But remember, change can also bring opportunity. If managed carefully, the transition to a more multipolar financial system
Yeah.
could actually lead to greater stability and fairness.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the fear of the unknown.
Right.
But it's important to remember that the future isn't predetermined.
No,
It's shaped by the choices we make today.
absolutely. And that's why conversations like this are so important.
Mm.
We need to be having these discussions about the potential benefits and risks of new technologies
Right.
and how we can navigate this rapidly changing world.
Okay, I'm feeling a little more grounded now.
Good.
It's clear that this strategic Bitcoin reserve is just one piece of a much larger puzzle,
Yeah.
a puzzle that involves the future of money technology and global power dynamics.
It's a puzzle that's still being assembled,
Yeah.
and the outcome is far from certain.
Right. But we can't just sit back and wait for the pieces to fall into place.
No, we can't.
We need to be actively engaged, informed, and prepared to adapt as the world around us continues to transform.
I couldn't agree more. So what can we do as individuals to navigate this complex and evolving landscape?
Well, for starters, we can educate ourselves about the technologies and trends that are shaping the future.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Hmm.
The more we understand about Bitcoin blockchain technology and the forces driving these changes,
Right.
the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions.
And we can engage in thoughtful discussions like this one, share our perspectives, challenge our assumptions.
Yeah, it's all about having open minds, critical thinking skills, and a willingness to embrace change.
And most importantly, we need to remember that we're not just passive observers in this unfolding narrative.
Right.
We are active participants,
Yeah.
and the choices we make, both big and small, will contribute to shaping the world we live in.
Well said.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the strategic Bitcoin reserve, let's remember that the future is not set in stone.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic and evolving landscape, and we have the power to influence its direction. That's a great note to end on. So to our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring, learning, and questioning. The world of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is full of possibilities, both exciting and daunting. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.